About yourself,
Yes.
please.
Yep, so my name is Corey Vanderpool. I'm the Director of Business Development for Magnum Innovations. I've been with the company for about maybe 6.5 years. Prior to joining Magnum, I was the director for an Ocean Alliance, if you're familiar with that. That was when I became familiar with an Ocean products and wireless technology. I was with them for 3.5 years and then joined Magnum and have been helping them to grow their OEM channels and some little bit of distribution to the marketplace, and also looking ahead to new product opportunities, new solution opportunities, and kind of what's down the line in the future. So yes, happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corey. And it's really, like I said, a pleasure to have Corey and Magnum Innovation to kick off this panel session. And my name is Robert Lee once again, and I'm the product marketer at Signify. So I'm responsible for the product marketing strategy, also the partner development here in the US. So it's my pleasure. And then so let's get the panel session started. So tell us a little bit about Magnum Innovations, because before it was not called the Magnum Energy Solutions.
Yep.
So I'm sure there's a lot of thought that go behind it when the company
Sure.
went through that name change.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So Magnum Energy Solutions started in about 2009, 2010. And when we began, we were really focused on HVAC controls. A lot of the bang for the buck in the market was on programmable thermostats and setbacks. And so we were doing a lot of hotel opportunities and a lot of colleges and universities and sort of light commercial. And a lot of it was about ROI back then. Not that it's not about that today, but it was really about ROI back then. So a lot of our sales were promoted towards ROI. Over the course of time, as we've all seen, the LED lighting market has completely changed the game. And today, LED lighting is very much the Trojan horse for everything else potentially to go into the building. And so we, as a company, have also modified and evolved ourselves. When we were acquired in October of last year by a private equity firm that was an investor in Magnum, and we're actually associated with some lighting companies that they own, so it's a perfect fit for us. We took that opportunity to change our names to Magnum Innovations because really for us it's not just about energy anymore. It's not just about energy efficiency. Of course, that's an absolute wonderful byproduct of what we do, but really we're about innovative solutions for the smart building. We really took that opportunity to go ahead and change our name so we can position ourselves for the future.
Great. I think that when you talk about innovation, I think that's what Signify stands for as well, because there's so much going on, right? There's new standards, new requirements, and then like D4I, for example, DIA for Internet, IoT. So I think there's a lot of things happening in the industry. So with that in mind, I want to do a bit of a level set, first of all, namely that what does connected lighting mean to you? Because that is a term that means a lot of things for different people, wireline, wireless, you name it, right? So the industry is evolving so much. So give us a little bit your perspective on that.
Sure. So two things that I think of when we talk about connected lighting, and I know it means something different probably for a lot of different people. The first one is a little bit more out there, but to me, connected lighting is also about us as humans being connected to lighting and being able to have control over, involvement in what illuminates our lives from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to work, to the time we go to bed, to the time we stop looking at our phones, which for me happened about 3 a.m. last night. I picked it back up and woke myself back up. But so that connected to our environment, to luminaires, is something that we have not thought a lot about in years past. So things like tunable white lighting is something that we're very passionate about because it allows humans to be far more connected and involved with what illuminates their lives and what has an impact on their physical and mental well-being. So for me, that's kind of the first part about connected lighting, is how we are connected to lighting and everything else in the building. That's a big part of what we think about when we design and develop and launch solutions. And then the second part for Magnum, and it's a very important part of what it is that we do, it's a big differentiator for us, is a more traditional sense of connected, where we really specialize in connecting lighting and other wireless products to existing building management systems. So those two things are what really connectivity is about for us.
Right, and I think that you mentioned about tunable white. Actually, tunable white is one of the major themes this year in terms of the exhibition, and so we're going to touch on that a little bit. But I would like to ask you, in the context of that connected lighting that you just talked about, how important is the driver within the luminaire, right? Because to me, the driver is really the engine that powers luminaires. But I think that there are a lot of things that has happened over the years, especially with the introduction of a so-called digital interface between the driver and sensor. I think that really kind of start to unlock the potential, and you can use a very cost-effective, network lighting control solution, or you can use something very advanced, like you said, and connect to the building management system. So tell me a little bit from your perspective, from the control side, how important it is to have a driver. Specifically, Signify has a Xitanium SR for both indoor and outdoor. So I think that's one of, I would call it the kind of a crown jewel from the connected lighting standpoint. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, yeah. So as we evolved as a company and as we got into lighting, we sort of had just kind of a here and there solution. And then we began working with Philips at the time, Signify today. I still have a hard time saying it, but I'm going to do my best. I say Philips Signify.
Okay.
I know that's not right.
That too.
I know that's not approved. We started working with Signify some years ago, and actually the first node we ever made, the first fixture integrated node we ever made, and our team worked very closely with Sri and Al Marble, was an energy reporting capable dolly node. It's actually sitting right over there. It fits into an SR Evo kit, and I remember Mike, our CEO, talking to our chief engineer and said, we're going to make a dolly node. And we said, do you know what dolly is? And our chief engineer goes, I've heard of it. And about 30 days later, he had the design for a dolly node. And about 60 to 90 days after that, he had a working prototype. And the first node we ever made was a dolly node, and we pretty much just knew what it stood for. And so that understanding of what was possible with SR at the time from an energy reporting perspective really, set, our ears on fire to say, wow, with the kind of intelligent nodes that we're trying to make and the connectivity that we have to building management systems, we really can make the data that is possible from these drivers really, really important and matter. And so as that's evolved to SR Outdoor, which we've been very involved with as well, and now with the tunable white driver from Signify, and potentially one that is both energy reporting and tunable white, we really feel we're in a great position to make that data matter. It sounds very cliche, but we're serious when we say that.
And I think that because of the fact that I'm very intimately involved with the Xitanium SR project, so I want to say that, to me, the Xitanium SR, I really think of it as a digital foundation. I did a webinar back in the beginning of this year. I think that's one of the points I keep trying to emphasize, is that think of all the luminaires that you have out there, right? A lot of them are, being replaced and so forth. So now you have an opportunity to put in the LED lighting systems. And then based on what I understand is that these systems will last for quite a long time, 5, 10 years. So I think that it behooves you not to put in a digital driver like Xitanium SR in there on day one, so you have the digital foundation upon which you can build your connected lighting solution by plugging the sensors to the digital interface. For example, you can do power metering. You have the precision in terms of control. And in fact, you mentioned about tunable white last year. Thanks to Magnum, you guys were the first one that were able to demonstrate a wireless control tunable white solution. And then this year, well, of course, we have it as well. But I think that is how the evolution of the connected lighting is that you set a digital foundation so that you have an open interface such that different partner can be invited to participate and take advantage of that. So I think that tunable white is a perfect example. And second thing I want to mention is the fact that because you're talking about building management system, energy reporting, so we have the digital driver now who can have that information inside the driver, not only in terms of reporting, but also in terms of doing the data diagnostic, all of that capability. So quite frankly, everything nowadays is connected. Your cars, your phone, maybe even refrigerator, if you go, lucky of you who have that kind of connected refrigerator. So certainly lighting is become not just a instrument for lighting, but it's as an instrument for communication.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And obviously everyone is seeing this, and you've got sort of two camps. You've got the driver as what we would look at as a point of failure with fixtures that are coming over, very inexpensive fixtures, and really making their way into the market. And in most instances, it's the driver in those equations that becomes a problem. And so we have the concerns about going away from the use of a driver because of sort of the reputation that those kinds of inexpensive solutions are unfortunately providing to the market. And a lot of that is based on ROI, and that's fine, but we typically, I sell far less on ROI today than anything else. For us, it's about the data. What can the solution do for you? How can it integrate? How seamless is it? And so for us, really being able to promote and utilize good quality drivers, not just from their data perspective, but just from the quality perspective, it is worth it for us to promote solutions that are good quality and have the data and not just something thrown into a fixture and let's meet your 24-month payback. That for us is really not how the sale works.
And I think that I also want to add to the fact that I think that if you think about connected lighting, it's not one size fits all. I mean, obviously, there are those that are very, very price conscious. So in that case, regular dimming 0 to 10, that would be fine. Which is, I understand and appreciate that. But at the same time, I think that we're really at this kind of cross, threshold or the crossroad where I think that, if you invest in technology now and 2-3 years, how do you know that the tenants or the people who are actually using the lights say, hey, I'd like to be able to do this now. And then instead of replacing the entire luminaire, and then at least you put in the digital driver on day one, I think you can say, yes, I can handle that. And this is what we can do to help to make that happen.
Absolutely.
And then, so speaking of a tunable white, I think we have something pretty exciting to show our audience, right?
Yes, we do.
So let me just kind of bring out my packet here. So this is actually something that we had done last year, and maybe I can get it for you.
Yeah.
Right?
So we have two ways that we do tunable white. So we can do and I'm just going to start pressing buttons.
All right, that's fine.
They say stuff on there, so I'm just going to say that. This is going to be 30% at 3,800.
And just so before for the audience, and then maybe cameraman can zoom in there. We actually, this is the case, we have a Xitanium SR Flex Tune driver. So it's a digital driver that's specifically designed for the tunable white application. And then we pair that with the Magnum sensor. And then the sensor has built-in occupancy sensing and daylight harvesting as well. And the nice thing about this approach really is that think about a fixture like this, right? You don't have to have an expensive gateway. You can basically just wireless control, and there's a wireless wall switch from Magnum, of course. So think about the different application that you can think of, right? Schools, hospitals, right? So now you have the lighting is not just just not just illumination. It actually give you the visual cue. So think about the patient, think about the teachers, talking to the student using light, hey, it's not just dimming up and down, but also use a color temperature to send a cue, say, hey, it's time for us to do something different, or patient kind of, we're getting close to the bedtime, whatever it is, right? So there's become additional way to use lighting that you would not be able to do before. And not to say that you cannot do it now, but it might be rather costly from that standpoint. So having a wireless control help to alleviate that problem.
So we can do it two ways. This would be sort of a static way of doing it where you just need a switch and the fixture integrated module that allows you to do tunable white with their driver. And so you can do a number of different scenarios just from a switch. You would change through selected color temperatures. We've got 4 different ones here on this double rocker switch. And then we also have the ability to do dynamic or more automatic color tuning. So from a building management system or from a Magnum software platform, you would be able to modulate or mimic a circadian rhythm throughout the course of the day, as opposed to having it just be a switch connected to a fixture. So, there's some great applications for this, like Robert mentioned. We all have sort of an innate preference from a illumination perspective about what kind of light we like. I like the very red light, the 2700. I would live in that all day because I feel like it just makes me look better. And the very bright blue light, I try to stay away from, even though I know that keeps me up. So in this instance, in an office environment, in a classroom environment, in a medical facility, you've got all different kinds of people recovering from various things. And in this very simple scenario, you've got a wireless battery-free switch you could technically place on a bedside table next to a hospital bed, and each side of a room, in case there's people sharing, have control over what color temperature they prefer in the side of their room. So there's some really interesting applications, and like Robert said, it's finally something that is cost-effective to deploy. So yeah, we're super excited about it. We've deployed some projects in tunable white, but we're very excited for Philips's launch of their tunable white driver. Excuse me, Signify's.
Yeah, and then one thing I want to add about the driver, because the driver is the heart of these sort of tunable white system, is that actually we have a setup over on that table that after we finish the session, is that there are other solutions out there, and then there are those obviously from Signify called the Flex Tune. The thing to point out is that when you talk about color tuning, you have to be very careful about in terms of how precise, right? Because you don't want to have one big room. If you're using the 0 to 10, for example, you may have in the back is not precise, not the same color temperature. I'm sure that for the lighting designer, they're just pulling their hair out like losing my hair right now. But the point is this, is that you need to be precise and you want to be consistent across the room. And then having a digital system that is wirelessly controlled without expensive wire, like power over Ethernet, for example, really reduce the barrier of entry for schools, for hospitals, or commercial buildings. And you have the lighting as a different, open out a new dimension in terms of how to use lighting to improve that, user experience or the people who are actually under the light. Absolutely. And I think that preciseness, control, and also the fact that it's wireless, that means that it's a lot more, I'll call it easier and cost-effective that way.
Totally agree.
And then with that said, I want to transition to a little bit different topic in terms of connect lighting. What are some of the challenges that you have experienced or encountered? And then I want to put this in a better context. We were talking about this before the interview, was that Corey just recently moved from Virginia to Montana. And then it's a pretty harrowing experience with all the little time that you have. So I was thinking that, hey, could you put it in a better context in terms of how would you compare the marketing or getting your customer to adopt connected lighting compared with moving from a place that you're comfortable with, right? You're very comfortable with the surrounding, now going to the new frontier of digital lighting or the new Montana, for example. So maybe give a little bit perspective on what do you think are the challenges, the things that you can learn from, or all of us can learn from.
So when Robert told me he was going to ask me this question, it wasn't on our previous list, so I thought I was going to get a little thrown off. But actually, now that I think about it, I've got a perfect answer. So cost and empty promises. And I will relate it to both. So planning a move, the cost of moving across the country and having to select exactly what you want to take because you know that whatever you put on that truck is going to cost you an arm and a leg. And the empty promises by all the people that told me they'd be able to transport my precious vehicle to Montana at a cost-effective price. So let me then relate those to connected lighting. Oftentimes, our biggest challenge is the cost of other connected lighting systems and control systems as compared to what we offer, because we really try to make innovative not expensive, and we try to tailor solutions really for what the customer needs. But a lot of what makes it difficult for us to sell our solution are all the people that come in before us, promising everything under the sun, and then delivering a price and the customer completely freaking out and saying, never mind, I don't want to do controls anymore. And that has been a very frustrating part of what it is that we're trying to overcome. So we're really good at value engineering a solution, and particularly after somebody, and I won't mention who those companies are, because I think some are presenting here later today, but they really make it difficult for the rest of us to come back in with what is the solution that the customer needs for a price that the customer is willing to pay. So that is one of our barriers. The other thing is empty promises. So with empty promises, we come across a lot the promise of connectivity between systems, between a lighting control system and a building management platform, which we do a lot of work in that vein, and we're seeing a lot more projects where that is a requirement. And so companies making a lot of promises about the integration capabilities of their system to existing systems and really not delivering. And again, that hurts us because we do it and we do it very well, but the backlash becomes, well, it didn't work the first couple of times, so we just don't think that it's possible. So we really find ourselves, it's not so much what protocol do you use, what's the distance you can get, those, is it hardwired or wired or wireless? Those are not our battles anymore. It's really about the solutions that are being promoted and sold and are not being that are not successful, not being supported, and not accomplishing what was promised to the customer. That's really our biggest challenge today, and that was my biggest challenge with my move.
Yeah, you mentioned about the empty promise. Actually, I'll put it in a slightly different context. I think just going to share from my experience too is that, I think Signify actually many, many years ago realized that we, to make connected lighting mainstream, we really had to kind of open up this sort of develop a protocol between the sensor and driver. And I think just like me, I'm speaking to you English, which is common language, but imagine when you get electronic, you have to communicate the data message sending back and forth, right? How do you make sure the message from the vendor A's sensor works with a system in the back end, right? How do you make sure that connectivity is seamless? I think that's the folks like Shreve in the room, for example, and others, Peter and so on, many of you probably heard of or met before, is that they realize that we need to develop a digital interface. So once you have the digital interface and get it standardized, then we really can make the connected lighting mainstream, make it more affordable, so you don't have the kind of one-off solution with a proprietary protocol. I think that at Signify, we made that commitment many, many years ago. I think that that kind of commitment has kind of paid off today, given the fact that we have the industry standard body like DIIA, the ANSI's kind of rallying around the standard because the leadership that Signify has demonstrated by working not just with SR partner companies, but all the other OEM to make sure that we collectively had to bring this forward to make connected lighting mainstream. So I think that in the context of the so-called empty promises, I'm sure that there are a few along the way, but that collectively we're moving in the right direction so that we have the flexibility working with you guys and with all the others for indoor, outdoor, whatever that might be, because there's always going to be new startup. They realize, hey, I can capitalize on this connectivity to leverage the data, leverage the services that help make lighting not just I will call it to illuminate, but rather is to communicate.
I agree totally. Standardization in the future will help to mitigate and hopefully eliminate a lot of the things that we come up against as challenges. So yes, totally agree with that.
So I want to ask you, so you guys don't have a booth at Life here, but I'm sure there are a lot of exciting things happening. So anything new and exciting you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so we are focused on continuing to expand and finalize our tunable white offering, both the static and dynamic. We've deployed projects, successful projects with tunable white, but they were not with Signify's driver, so we're looking forward to continuing to bring that to fruition and deploy projects together. We are going to put back on our roadmap the finalization of an outdoor lighting node that we started in partnership with Signify about 1.5 years ago. We just got very busy and kind of put it on the back burner, but we hope to get that back on the docket towards the end of this year and hopefully beginning of next. And we are also working on a Bluetooth solution because we don't want to be left out of the game, although we're being very strategic in how we launch that and how we're going to position that. We are also, probably from a programmatic perspective, is probably the largest thing that we're focused on right now is who and how we partner with companies to deploy successful and integrated solutions. So we have some industry partners. We launched a program in October of last year with our partner United Technologies and their companies Automated Logic and Carrier. So we are collectively launching an LED lighting control solution together into the market through channels of integrators, because we feel the integrators are the ones that help make these projects successful so that we don't create another round of backlash of people saying this stuff doesn't work and we're just not going to do controls. If I hear one more person say that they deployed a project and they only did LED fixtures and they left out controls, I'm going to lose my mind. We really want to make sure that that is not the trend that continues to happen. So we want to really make sure that we find the right partners to take these solutions to market, integrate them, commission them, support them, so that not only are we growing our business, but we're creating successful stories in the market, because that is really important to Magnum Innovations. So that program is the top thing that at least myself and a couple others at our company are working on.
Got it. And I think that you talk about system integrator. I think that all of you know that system integrator is such a key part. And I think that I would say playing even bigger role than ever before because they're the one who kind of put system together. Whereas before it was an electrician, but now the person had to know how to do the design, installation, commissioning, and support afterwards. So for those of you who do have time this Thursday, we have another panel session actually with a system integrator. I think that the point of that is really kind of put more spotlight on those folks who are providing the, I call it the last mile, right, in terms of how do you put things together.
Yep, they're critically important. We noted that a while ago, probably because our business model was just a little bit different than traditional lighting control companies. We were not going after a traditional representation, an agent aligning with lighting suppliers. Our plan to market was to go through integrators because we felt that they could deploy the solutions more successfully. So we took a little bit of a different path. For us, it's been very successful, been a little disruptive, but I think in the end, we're delivering solid, supported, successful solutions that are tailored to really what the customer is looking for and not just putting out things that the customer ends up looking around and going, why did I buy this? You know, no one knows how this works. No one supports this. No one picks up the phone when we call. We're not trying to do that. We're not a one and done and get out and just collect our money. We build partnerships and we build long-term success, and we want to continue to build a reputation that allows us to have longevity in this market.
So I want to ask you one question regarding the future. I mean, obviously we all have a different view, and there are a lot of things happening. So if you can just share with us your perspective, you know, what do you think the lighting industry will become in the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, on the way over here, I was asking Mike, our CEO, what he thought about that question, because for some reason I kind of drew a blank. Maybe it's just because it's so hard to think about the future when I just muddled through 5 days of moving to Montana. So maybe my foresight part of my brain is not working. And what Mike said, and I totally agree with it, is foreseeing some standardization as a necessary part of what happens into the future. There are so many solutions out there, and we're involved with many of them, whether that we're involved directly or we're supporting companies from a development perspective. There's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of empty promises, there's a lot of solid promises, there's a lot of success, a lot of failure. But in order to make sure that in 5 to 10 years from now, we're all still around and still doing what we hopefully love to do, that standardization is going to become essential for that to happen. So as far as technology, I can't foresee the future. I know what we think we're going to be doing and what we think is going to be the right solutions technologically, but standardization is critical for that to continue to happen and be successful.
Yeah, you mentioned standardization. I think I mentioned about ANSI, the DIIA, and then in the case of the latter, actually, they have I believe, a booth at Life Fair this year to specifically talk about the new, I think they announced it back in May of this year, about the D4I. Thrown at you guys, but the D4I stands for DALI for Internet or IoT, basically. So that is, again, I think that's the recognition that we need to have some standardization about the interface. So there's part 205, there's part, all the different parts in terms of data storage, data management, about digital drivers, So I think that's really the recognition that we need to kind of put things in the right order so our end customer will not be overly confused. And I use the word tyranny of choice in my webinar. Is it like too many choices? When we walk out to the supermarket aisle, is the health food section, there's too many. It's like, which one do I pick from, right? So I think that's the situation. So with that, we're going to open up for questions. I think that we got about 15 minutes or so. I do want to give you a chance to walk around and look at the booth that we have set up in this room. And so let's take some questions from the audience, please. And can I get a microphone? That's okay. So just raise your voice, raise your hand, and I can repeat the question for those who cannot see you.
Okay, so my question is directed at Corey. Corey, it seems that a lot of the OEMs have remained agnostic to different control systems, and they don't seem to partner with one specific control system as a manufacturer. Should they be doing that, or is there a reason why an OEM
Jim, I know Jim. That's a really good question. Yeah, so Jim asked, there's a lot of OEMs that have not really defined, some of which have not defined anything relative to controls, and others are trying to decide whether or not to partner up with one controls vendor or a multitude of controls vendors. And what I think about that decision-making process, should they go with one, or should they still be agnostic, but be partnering with others, or say that they're compatible with maybe 4 or 5 different control strategies? That is a fantastic question. I can tell you from experience that the companies that the OEMs that we work with that have selected Magnum as their forerunner from a controls perspective, we feel are having a lot more success. Now, not just directly with us, but also just on their own, than the groups that we've been talking to and working with over the last 4 or 5 years that have kind of remained agnostic and wanted to have something, on a lot of different things on their cut sheets. The only problem with that is because we are not necessarily a readily specified control strategy, I will say that OEMs who want to have a more specified, like a Lutron, a more specified control strategy, we're oftentimes the second one, in that if there's any leeway to make a recommendation, or if the customer comes back and is not happy with the price or the solution for any reason, we become the value engineered controls strategy. So I hate to say that they should choose one, because I think 2 potentially makes sense, particularly when Magnum is involved, because we are not the ones you're going to see on every single spec that comes through. But we are definitely, if given an opportunity or a seat at the table to have a discussion where the customer was like, listen, I'm not paying for this solution from X, Y, or Z, Magnum can come in and typically save that opportunity from a controls perspective. But that's a fantastic question.